Good morning, June Mary. I'm here to welcome you as Sister June Mary Deswysen, previously known as Sister Robert William, correct?
Yes.
And that's after your dad.
That's my dad's name, yes.
That's your dad's name. You are the first one that I have ever met personally that has been named through the years as Teacher of the Year, and that was in the Archdiocese of Miami. So applause, applause.
Thank you.
How did that come about?
I think I'm not sure, but I think that the teachers in the school and the principal voted. I don't know. You know,
You were probably written up in the paper, weren't you?
I've been written up in the paper several times, but I don't think I was written up at that time.
Well, did they give you a rose or a plaque?
They gave me a certificate.
And where were you at this time? At what school in Miami?
I was at St. Rose of Lima in Miami Shores.
A principal?
No, I was a teacher. It was early on in my career.
Mm-hmm.
When I left that school, I became a principal. But in that school, I was a teacher, and also I was assistant principal in charge of kindergarten through 5th grade.
How beautiful. You have love of children throughout your life.
Yes.
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 That's one of your hallmarks. And one of the last things you did before you came to Maria, I believe, was work in an inner city hospital. Is that correct?
I did that earlier before I came to Maria, but it is one of the very special things that I did. I worked in the special nursery for babies who were born drug addicted or HIV positive. Downtown Detroit, and if a mother at that time, I don't know what they do now, but at that time, if a mother gave birth to a child and she was drug addicted, the child was, they put her immediately into, so she would go through withdrawal and get off drugs, which meant that the baby didn't have a mother to come and cuddle and rock. And the baby was going through withdrawal just like an adult would. So they had to be held and rocked and
fed,
sang to.
Oh, how beautiful. How did that come about?
There was an article in the newspaper about a gentleman, an older gentleman, who did that. And I read the article, and when I read the article, I thought, well, that's the job for me. But it was a volunteer job. It wasn't, they didn't pay you.
Yes. But you didn't need to be paid for that?
No, you got paid just by the feelings of being there.
Who set you on sale for being a teacher? Who had a great influence on you early in your religious life?
Actually, I didn't want to be a teacher. When I entered, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had given no thought to what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a nun. And,
but weren't you a gymnast and an ice skater?
Right. And so I wasn't thinking about what I wanted to be, but I found out that there were some sisters that were nurses, and I thought, that's what I'd like to be, because nurses really help people. So I asked if I could go into nurses training, and was told, no, we're all teachers, you will be a teacher. So I went, you know, was missioned and went to be a teacher after the novitiate.
What was your first mission?
My first mission was St. Gemma's in Detroit. And I had just a wonderful, wonderful initiation into teaching. Sister Adele Wotiska had been teaching the class, but she was ill. She had cancer. But she was still at the convent. And so I would go in and teach the class every day, and then when I would come home, she had to have an eggnog every afternoon. And I would go up to her room. She was in bed, and I would give her all of the papers that the children had done that day, and then I would go down to the kitchen and I would make her eggnog. And by the time I got back to her room, she would have looked at everything and she'd be able to say to me, well, it looks like a lot of the children missed this question, and so I think probably you didn't teach that effectively. Let's talk about how you taught that.
Oh my.
Or she'd say, almost everybody got this one right. You did a good job on that. What did you do that made that a good, it was wonderful. And then we would make my plans for the next day. And, you know, of course, put in them, I'd have to reteach what I didn't do well. And, she was there for about 2 months. I had gone out at Christmas time, and she was there for about 2 months doing that with me. And that just got me started.
You probably had one of the best preparations ever. Seriously.
Yes.
To have that personal recommendation and guidance.
But then I had a second chance, too, at more help. The next year, I went to Clawson, and Sister Theophilus was at Clawson. There were 4 classes of each grade, and Sister Theophilus taught 1st grade. I taught 3rd grade, and there were a lot of nuns in Clawson. Sister Theophilus was in charge of all of the sisters, the young sisters, who taught 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And she taught me never to leave my classroom in the afternoon until I had everything out for the next day, every flashcard, everything out for the next day. She taught me little tricks like that. And I have passed her little suggestions on throughout my life to young teachers that I've mentored.
Beautiful. She was a primary teacher, was she not?
I know, and she tried to turn each of us, and she was pretty successful, I think.
And so were you, I might add. What brought you to the Adrian Dominicans? Did you have them in grade school, or?
I went to Rosarian.
Oh.
Rosarian Academy.
That was your first experience of the
Adrian?
No.
It was my first experience. But my parents knew the Adrian Dominicans.
In what respect?
In Royal Oak. They lived in Huntington Woods, which is I don't know if it's a suburb or what it is, but it's in Royal Oak. And St. Mary of Royal Oak was their parish. And they met the Adrian Dominicans at St. Mary of Royal Oak.
Probably at church.
Pardon me?
Probably at church.
Oh, I'm sure at other things too. My mother just
very active.
Loved doing things for the nuns. I of course don't know that because I wasn't born yet, but all my life she loved doing things for the sisters. And so I'm sure that she did things for the sisters. I know when I entered, there were still a lot of sisters around who had been at St. Mary's of Royal Oak. And you know how the sisters will, I'd say the older sisters, me, you meet someone new and you want to know their name. And so sisters would say to me, what is your name? And I would say, June Mary Deswysen. And they would say, Deswysen? Are you related to Robert Deswysen? And I would say, well, he's my father. And oh, they'd say, I was at St. Mary's of Royal Oak, and your father used to give us a brand new car every year. I heard that from so many nuns, because St. Mary's was a big place, a lot of nuns there, and over the years.
And your father must have been a automobile distributor?
He owned a dealership.
In what
Ford.
Ford. A Ford family then. A Ford family.
Absolutely.
And tell me how that's related to your birth.
Well, the barbecue restaurant where I was born.
Say that again for the listening audience.
The barbecue restaurant where I was born.
All right. Now, tell us what you mean by that.
In 1942, it wasn't a barbecue restaurant. It was a Rexall drug, and it was right on Main Street in Royal Oak in the middle of the business district. And the second floor of the Rexall drug was a private hospital owned by Henry Ford. And it was to be used when Henry Ford or anybody in his family needed to be in the hospital. And when they needed to staff it, they would bring staff from the big Henry Ford Hospital downtown. And when my mother was about to give birth to me, my father knew Henry Ford. They had become friendly. And when my mother was about to give birth to me, Mr. Ford offered that she could use his private hospital.
Oh, my.
So I was born
above the Rexall.
Above the Rexall drug, but it is now a barbecue restaurant. So I refer to it.
It's the barbecue restaurant. Now, am I correct in recalling that your parents delivered a baby late in their life?
They delivered me late in their life, and then they delivered a second baby almost 6 years after me, my sister.
What is her name?
Mary Ann.
And is she in the Detroit area also?
No, she's in California. She's a wonderful sister. I have to say that. I just have been lucky.
You're very fortunate. Does she have more children than two?
She has three.
She has three children.
Two of them live in California. That's how she got out there. Two of them are entertainers, and they live in Los Angeles, and she lives a little north of Los Angeles, she and her husband, in Ventura. The third child, her third child, is a daughter, and she and her husband were on their way to California to move there. And they stopped to sightsee in Texas and fell in love with Texas and bought a house in San Antonio. So that's where they live.
That's where they live, yes. Well, what was life like at home when you two were growing up?
We didn't grow up together. She was so much younger than I.
Okay.
But we did, I played with her a lot, and she was wonderful, my sister. But when we were growing, I had almost what I might call a magical childhood, in the sense that it was everything good. Everything good that a child could have in their life, I had. And my parents were able to provide well for us, but they also, both of my parents had come from poverty. And my father had done well in business, and that's why they were able to provide so well for us. But they didn't want us to take that for granted. They wanted us to know what it was like to not have everything that you wanted. And so they always kind of made us work for what we got, or we had everything we needed and most of what we wanted, but we had to kind of work for it.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in 5th grade, we were ice skating. Ice skating was the thing that my friends and I were doing.
And this was in Florida?
And this was in Florida.
So your parents had moved from the Detroit area to Florida.
Right.
Where in Florida? Miami?
Coral Gables, Florida. It's near Miami. And we, ice skating was something that we did. And we all, you know, children decide what they're going to want. And we had to rent skates, and they were black and ugly. And we decided that we wanted to buy skates that would be white and pretty. And so they at the rink where we skated, they had a little store and they sold skates, ice skates. And so we all decided we wanted ice skates, and we told our parents. And all the other girls got them for their birthdays. And I remember thinking my birthday was in October.
I'll get them then.
And yeah, I'll get the ice skates in October. And my birthday was the last one, so everybody else had theirs, but I had to wait till my birthday. Well, my birthday came and went, and I didn't get ice skates. And my mother kept saying, well, you don't need to buy ice skates. You can rent them. They have perfectly good skates there to rent. And I thought, oh, she doesn't understand. But what can, you know, they're not going to get me the ice skates. I got them for Christmas. But they just thought it was good that I would wait that little bit of time to learn what it was like to want something and
not get it when you wanted it.
And not get it right away.
Yes. The influence that your parents had on you certainly had the flowering of love of children in you. Would you agree to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
In what way were they mentors or inspirations for that love of children?
Well, my mother had grown up in an orphanage. And so she had a special feeling for children who needed a loving home and loving parents. And my parents were married 16 years before I was born. They wanted children, God didn't bless them with children. And they didn't have all of the things available then to help people get children. So during that time, they filled their home with children that they took in.
Like neighbor children
or just children that they would find out about that needed a loving home and a loving family for one reason or another.
For a short time, or?
Most of them were short term. A few were like from their childhood into the time when they would move out and start their own life. Some of the short-term children returned. And when I was born, there were 3 teenagers in the family. And one of them was going in his freshman year at U of D, at college. The girl was, shortly after I was born, she graduated from high school and she entered the IHMs.
Good heavens.
And the third one, his name was Donnie, and he was 14 years old. And Donnie, I loved Donnie.
Like a brother.
My babysitter, he was my playmate, he was my protector, he was my brother.
Beautiful.
All of my life, he was my brother. He died last year. But just before he died, maybe 6 months before he died, he was here visiting me with his daughter. And I thought, you know, it's time I told him that. I said, Donnie, I have to tell you, I tell people you're my brother. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, that's all right, Junie. I tell people you're my sister.
Oh, how beautiful.
And his daughter was there with him.
Mm-hmm.
She's an adult now. And she said to me, she said, he does. He tells everybody he knows that he has a sister who's a Dominican nun.
Oh, how proud. How proud. Didn't your mother call them guests, house guests? The
yes,
children house
yes,
guests.
She called them house
Did you ever get jealous of the attention that were given to the house guests?
I didn't like the children coming and going in the house mostly because they would be put in my bedroom and I would move into my sister's bedroom. But also, there was one particular child when this was after we moved to Florida. And he stayed for short times, but came back repeatedly, and he would bully me to get what he wanted, and I didn't like that. And I used to beg my mother to please don't take in any more children, please. Mm-hmm. And she would say to me, if our home is large enough, then our hearts should be large enough.
Oh, I can see why you would never forget that. That was a guiding light throughout all of your life.
Yeah.
No, your mother must have taught you many homemaking skills, such as sewing and baking and
yes.
cake making.
My mother was an expert seamstress. She sewed everything we wore. And when I was 10 years old, my sister went to kindergarten, and the school, the kindergartners didn't wear uniforms. And so my mother told me that she was going to have more sewing to do now, making clothing for my sister to wear to school. And it was time that I started doing my own sewing.
At 10?
At 10. And she bought a new Singer sewing machine. And in those days, when you bought a new Singer sewing machine, you got 8 free sewing classes. So she sent me to those 8 free sewing classes. And from then on, I made all my own clothes. And I made, at age 10, I was making my clothes, and I was making shirts for my father.
Oh, my heavens.
When I entered,
oh, my.
The first year I was on mission, mm-hmm. I had gone on mission in January, mm-hmm. and just before Father's Day, Sister Catherine Henry, bless her heart, she was a wonderful, wonderful superior. And she gave us all, I don't know, $5 or $10, I don't know how much, and took us to the Northland Mall in Detroit and told us to go buy a Father's Day present. Well, in my life, every gift you gave away, you made. And that's what my mother had taught us. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the fabric store in the mall, and I bought everything I needed to make my father a shirt. When we got back to the convent, everybody's showing off what they bought and all the typical, you know. And I pull out fabric and a pattern, and everybody started making fun of me.
Oh, yeah. Till they saw the finished product.
But I did make a shirt, and I sent it, and then my sister tells the story about they used to go out to breakfast every Sunday morning after Mass, and my father was very friendly. He would talk to anyone. And he was standing in line to pay the bill, and my mother and sister were standing off to the side waiting for him, which is the way we did it. And the lady behind him, he didn't have on the shirt I made that day, The lady behind him had on a dress made of the same fabric. And he says to her, "Did you make your dress?" And, you know, and she said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Well, the reason I know is because I have a shirt out of that same fabric that my daughter made for me." And then he says, "My whole family wears homemade clothes." Points out my mother and my sister. He had no idea that homemade clothes was a term that, that was not
for cookies
fitting the beautiful clothing my mother sewed. Yeah.
And didn't your father introduce you to Christian, what I would call Christian service?
Yes. My father helped many, many, many people, and we didn't even know it.
Probably heard about it at his death.
At his funeral. Literally hundreds of people showed up telling us, some of them we knew because we had gone to school with their children, some of them we had never seen before, telling us how my father had put their children through college or paid their children's tuition, or we used to have to, I wanted to take my lunch to school because all these kids that had bologna sandwiches, they smelled so good. And I had to eat the hot lunch program, which was basically government beef. I'm sure you remember government beef.
Exactly.
And I wanted to take my lunch to school, and my father would always say, "No, we have to support the hot lunch program, because if the hot lunch program has to stop, there will be a lot of children who won't have lunch."
Oh my.
So we support the government lunch the school lunch program with you buying your lunch. And he would go to the cafeteria to pay for my lunch by the month. I didn't know what he was doing. And it turned out, I found out after he died, that he would go down and he would ask the lady in the cafeteria, "Now, how many children cannot afford lunch this month?"
Oh, how beautiful.
And he would pay for everybody's lunch that whose parents couldn't afford. So these people showed up at his funeral.
Well, if I knew where their grave sites might be, I would want to put on their headstones 5 stars, because they sound like 5-star parents. The love of children and the warmth that was brought into your heart. And it didn't end in the home. It was extended. That's why perhaps you ended up with your teaching career, not only as a teacher and principal, but tell us what you did later in life that made a difference in children's lives.
Are you talking about the Learning Center? That
yes.
Sister Teresa Nightingale and I, we were in a town that didn't have anything like that available. And I was principal of the school in that town.
Where was this?
Port Charlotte, Florida. And Sister Teresa was teaching. And there were just so many children that, not just that went to our school, but went to other schools that needed special help, or adults too. Anyway, we knew that was where we needed to be. So we left the school and we opened this learning center. And
a garage.
The first one was in a garage. We rented a house that had a beautiful 2-car garage. 2 garages, really, 2 1-car garages. And we could turn those into 2 classrooms. And we started with children, and almost as soon as we started, people who had children in the public school that we didn't even know would be knocking on our door and telling us about their child and how he had trouble learning or whatever. And so it just blossomed.
You received a certificate in learning disability, teaching children with learning.
Before we opened the clinic, I knew that we had to have a certified teacher in learning disabilities. And so I took classes at night and received a certificate in
somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was in Asheville. Was that Asheville?
Maybe.
That you started an individual reading program?
Oh, that was in Miami.
In Miami.
That was right at the time when we were first beginning to realize that every child on the same page at the same time was not effective. And education had to be individualized. And so but there was really nothing available to do that with. So I made an individualized reading program.
Very creative.
Pardon me?
Very creative.
Thank you. And it was a success. And so I ended up going out and giving talks to groups of principals and had a slideshow, pictures, and then the principals, if they wanted somebody on their faculty to learn how I was doing this, they would send people to the school and they would sit in my classroom for a week. And I did demonstration teaching. I didn't know the people who came. The principal made all the arrangements. People would just show up in the classroom. And
oh, what a delight. Did you ever write that up for publication?
No, I didn't. No.
So it's still in your heart. But think of all the teachers you influenced. What a contribution you've made during your life to the teaching profession, the education, the prime education you've given to children as well as teachers. How can we thank you, June Mary?
Well, thank you.
Yes. God bless you. This has been wonderful.